Hello, everybody. Welcome to Yankees Mania. It is episode 7, and I hope everyone's doing very well today. And so let's just start off with the big baseball news of the week. The MLB Hall of Fame results were announced, and once again, another battle for the MLB in a time where really it's not what MLB needs. I mean, Barry Bonds missed the Hall of Fame. Roger Clemens missed the Hall of Fame. David Ortiz made the Hall of Fame. And just before I start this off, I like David Ortiz. He's obviously a great player. I think he's a Hall of Famer. But if you don't put Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens in, how are you putting David Ortiz in the first ballot with over 75% of the vote? Makes absolutely no sense to me. But we'll get into that in a little later. But I just want to talk about Barry Bonds real quick because the fact that this guy is not in the Hall of Fame is a crime, and it's amazing because I think the overwhelming majority of the population think that Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, again, just to be clear, career batting average, 298, a career on-base percentage. This is over at a 20-year period, by the way. He had a career on-base percentage of 450. That is ridiculous. Slugging percentage, 600. OPS, career OPS, 1.051. That is make-believe numbers. I mean, he was by far the greatest player in the sport for well over a decade. I mean, you see some of these numbers. I mean, in my opinion, some of his most impressive years weren't necessarily the years where he had 70 home runs. But, I don't have it up here, but I believe this was maybe 2001. His on-base percentage was over 600. Batting average, 362. I mean, I just don't understand. 45 home runs. The guy was ridiculous with an OPS of 1.422. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to me. Then you have this guy, when you look at his home runs, I mean, just consistently, this is just across the board. So this guy was obviously relatively healthy, too, to put up these numbers. I mean, 46, 37, 33, 42, 40, 37, 34, 49, 73. 46, 45. I mean, it's just make-believe numbers. It makes no sense that a guy like this isn't going to be in the Hall of Fame. And again, I understand why you don't want to put some people such as a Mark McGwire or Sammy Sosa in the Hall of Fame, because at least these guys were pure power hitters who made the Hall of Fame, honestly, probably based on the fact that they use steroids. Barry Bonds is a different case. And again, when I say Bonds, I also mean Clemens, but I think Bonds is a bigger issue because I actually think he's a top 3, maybe top 2 player who ever played the sport. So, arguably the greatest player who ever played the sport. Most home runs of all time. And listen, I understand you don't want to stain, and some people say it's unfair to the other players. I understand that. But the Baseball Hall of Fame is a museum. It's a museum, okay? It's a museum. And how do you tell the story of Major League Baseball without telling the story of the steroid era and that of Barry Bonds? It doesn't make any sense. And again, there's always been issues with the Baseball Hall of Fame. Pete Rose not being in is a joke, but this is just another example. And again, I like David Ortiz. I really do. I think he's a great player, but it doesn't make any sense. The guy was on a list that was released of people who used steroids in 2003, on the same list as A-Rod, as some of these other guys. It makes no sense. It's a joke. It's a complete joke. But Bonds missed it. He got 66% of the vote. I thought he would get at least maybe 73, 74, but no, it wasn't even close. So, obviously, change needs to be made in the Hall of Fame. So Bonds missed it. He might get in a few years from now when it goes on to the next process of the Hall of Fame eligibility. I don't even know how it works. I really don't. I don't even care. If I'm Barry Bonds, I don't care. I'm sure he's doing just fine, but I'm sure it definitely means something to be in the Hall of Fame for these guys, and I get it. As I was saying, you can't tell the story of baseball without telling the story of Barry Bonds. It makes no sense. It's a joke. So when you go to Cooperstown, you're not going to see Barry Bonds. You're just going to leave out that era like it never happened. It doesn't make any sense. It's a complete joke. The guy's stats were ridiculous. First of all, okay, I'm going to see it again. I'm going to list you some more. The guy's a 7 MVPs. It's ridiculous. For a baseball player, it doesn't happen. Silver Slugger Awards. It's unbelievable. Like 14 All-Star appearances. The guy is a complete stud. And again, my thing with Bonds is he wasn't a pure power hitter. He also had some of the greatest plate discipline in the history of the entire sport. a 600 on base percentage is make believe. If no one even has 500 on base percentage now, or even 450, so for a guy to have a 600 on base percentage, and this was just like 15 years ago, I mean, it's unbelievable. Again, it's a disgrace, and him and Clemens should both be in, and I don't even want to talk about it anymore. It's just a disgrace. It's a stain on their on the Hall of Fame, and yeah, that's really all I have to say about that. Again, just to give you some preliminary percentages of people who either got in or didn't get in. Bonds 66. Ortiz just got in on his first ballot, 77%. Schilling missed it in his final year with 65.2. I'm sorry, that's Clemens with 65.2. Schilling had 58.6. Scott Rowland had 63.2. And Alex Rodriguez had 34.3. Which we're going to get into in a little while, Ortiz versus A-Rod, because I have a lot to say about that. However, we do actually have some positive news on the MLB lockout process, which I think is, and again, at this point, I'll take positive news, all I can take. But I'm just going to read you an excerpt here from ESPN's Jeff Passan, where Jeff reported how the MLB owners agreed to the union's proposal for a bonus pool for players in their pre-arbitration years. Bonuses would be awarded to players who finish in the top 30 in WAR. First of all, before I go anywhere, it's pretty crazy. It's a pretty crazy thing that we're going to be giving bonus. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but we're going to be giving bonuses based on players' WAR, which isn't really, I mean, now it's getting more of a well-known stat. I'm a big WAR guy. I think WAR is a very important stat. But a lot of people out there, a lot of friends I know who aren't really educated on statistics like this, they don't think it means anything. And again, I think this is a perfect example. The fact that they're giving bonuses now based on this just goes to show you how analytically driven baseball is now. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying analytics are key now when it comes to making teams, making draft decisions. It is absolutely vital. This is how teams operate now in the 2020, before we enter the 2022 season. But the point is here, a lot of nitty-gritty stuff, but progress is being made. The Players Association is making concessions. The league is making concessions. And hopefully, I'm hoping maybe within 2 weeks that we can have a resolution, because I just don't want to lose any games. And I at this point, I'm honestly feeling pretty hopeful that all the preliminary reports that we're hearing are good news. So I think this is definitely going to be, I hope that we are in the 8th inning of this thing, hopefully, and getting this thing over with, because the sport is dying. I mean, especially with the NFL, how many people are watching the NFL right now? The ratings are through the roof. MLB needs to get back as soon as possible. Again, so now that hopefully, again, it's been difficult because we haven't really been able to discuss much baseball or much Yankees like plans per se since starting this podcast, because I mean, there really hasn't been much to talk about. Baseball's been in a lockout. But I think once the lockout ends, the Yankees need to focus on getting a shortstop, whether it be Correa, a Story. I'm just going to keep throwing it out there. And no one's really talked about it in a while, once again. But Matt Chapman or a Matt Olson would be absolutely vital to getting this team back. Again, super important. It's super important that the Yankees also solidify their pitching staff. Again, I still think that they could use another top-line starter. I don't know who it is. They just need one more starter. If you have a Cole, Severino, and another, like a Rodon type person, that is an elite staff. That's an elite staff. So again, we'll certainly be talking much more about the offseason once the lockout actually ends, because then the hot stove is officially active. So, and one thing from the Hall of Fame ballot that I've actually had a lot of debates with people on about is the David Ortiz versus Alex Rodriguez drama. And I'm going to be honest, clearly I'm in a minority here, because Ortiz got 77% of the vote, Alex Rodriguez got 34% of the vote. But if you told me right now, if I had to pick one person that deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, David Ortiz or A-Rod, I'm going A-Rod, and it's not close. It's not even close. You have David Ortiz, who was an unbelievable player. His career stats cannot be debated. He is an unbelievable player. He is a Hall of Famer, in my opinion. But his career stats aren't the issue, once again. But the guy was, for most of his career, a designated hitter. He He was a DH who was, again, he was on a list of MLB players that were suspected of doing steroids, which the league then kind of put under wraps, for lack of a better term. Okay, again, this was when he was on the Twins, before he was on Boston, but I'm just saying it is out there. So how is the Hall of Fame Association, or whoever decides who's entering the Hall of Fame, how do you pick and choose? This is what I'm saying. There's no set of rules. It's basically a popularity contest, and David Ortiz is a very popular figure. He's a very popular figure, and that's probably why he got in the first ballot. If he wasn't on Fox Sports 1, who had a big post-baseball life per se, I don't know if he gets in his first ballot. He probably doesn't. It's a popularity contest, and that's not how it should be. A-Rod, I think, has certainly rebranded his image, but not to the extent as Ortiz, obviously. But A-Rod, again, I'm going to be objective here. A-Rod was suspended twice. Once in 07, 08, or 09, that area. And then he was busted again for the biogenesis scandal, which, of course, that was a disaster. There's no doubt these were horrible stains on Alex's career. But, again, the guy, three-time MVP, 696 home runs, one of the greatest players of all time. No doubt a better player than Ortiz. Ortiz is a great player, but he's no doubt that Alex Rodriguez is a better player than him. The guy he had 360, and even with Seattle, 360 in 1996. This is when 36 home runs, 420 on base. Again, this is the age of young shortstops. Jeter, Rodriguez. These are some of the greatest players of all time. A-Rod is one of the greatest players of all time. The fact that he got 34% of the ballot in his first year is a bad sign. And because Bonds and Clemens didn't get in, I don't know if Alex gets in. And that's really a shame. And it demeans the credibility of the entire system. So that's my take on that. But Alex Rodriguez is a Hall of Famer, in my opinion, no doubt. So, again, another thing that I've been seeing lately that's been circulating around Twitter that people have been talking about is who is the greatest pitcher in New York right now. Again, who is the greatest pitcher in New York right now? I'm a betting man. If you want one pitcher to take the game for me in one Game 7, if I had one game to win it all, I'm going DeGrom. I don't even think it's close. I'm going DeGrom over Scherzer and Cole. I just think that a guy like DeGrom, who's generally unhealthy a lot of the time, which really doesn't really get talked about enough as detriment to him, which I'm not just saying it is. It's not his fault. I'm just saying I think he's too good for his own good. The guy does things that no one else can do. He throws so hard. He throws breaking pitches that are so hard that no one else can do. It puts a lot of stress on his arm. And that's why he always has these ticky-tacky injuries, in my opinion, and which harm the team in the long run. And it's tough. It's kind of weird. Like, DeGrom probably next year might not be throwing as hard because he wants to protect his arm. And it's a tough balancing act that not many pitchers have had to do in the history of baseball because he's too good for his own good. But if I had one game, I'm going DeGrom. And controversial, maybe some people are going to say Yankee Homer. That's fine. I'm going Gerrit Cole number 2 and Max Scherzer number 3. People forget about Scherzer. Again, I know Cole had a rough wild card game start, and I'm still not really over that. I'm not going to lie. But Max Scherzer also had a dead arm, and it probably cost the Dodgers a World Series run. So people forget about that. And again, I think Scherzer's going to be fine, but a dead arm at 37 years old is that's a little worrying. So I don't know if he'll be the same pitcher he is, and it is the Mets. So free agents that go to the Mets sometimes don't work out, a la Yoenis Cespedes, a la Matt Harvey, etc., etc. But yeah, so hopefully next week, guys, I'm praying that we will be done with this lockout and we could finally start talking about actual hot stove news, because I want this to end just as much as everyone else. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next time.